All right, I want to do a quick video here on our tail feathers. I haven't done a video for a while, so I thought that would be a good time. It's a little past midnight here on August 1st. So my partner and I are having to reshoot the top coat of the Ekopoly Premium on our Piper Cub tail feathers. Everything was going really well up until just a few minutes after shooting. I say shooting, I mean spraying. So we had them actually hanging here. We took apart the members, but they were all hanging vertical. If I can find a photo, I'll upload it too. But they were all hanging vertical, and that was just so we could easily paint both sides in one setting, because it doesn't take that long to actually paint. Most of the time is spent just setting up and getting ready to paint. Anyway, so we went through the typical fog coats. Like, here's a picture of how they recommend fog coating. This is actually getting a little covered here with overspray, but you're working your way up until you get to the wet coat here. And the first three fog coats went great. Full color saturation at the third fog coat as expected. No anomalies, no bugs, nothing. Everything was going great. Get to the wet coat, and everything looks like it's going great. We spray it. In fact, when I sprayed it, I was like blown away by how good it looked. Like it was better than all the other things I'd sprayed previous to this. And it was just so shiny. It looked so good. And so I was pretty happy. It's like, all right. So I just kept going. What we did is we sprayed the first one, which happened to be the rudder. And the rudder was actually sitting in a fixture we had over here, and it was actually sitting vertical instead of hanging. So, just the way we set it up. Anyway, it was looking good. And so I moved on and, I sprayed both sides of the rudder, of course, all the edges and everything, and moved on and started doing the other ones. And I maybe got halfway through and then realized two things. One, I was running out of paint faster than it was expected. The second was the first thing I sprayed was starting to run. And you can kind of see, we've already sanded these out. These are how the runs were starting. So if you can imagine that this is sitting vertical, all of our runs basically started where there was just some kind of hump where the surface tension would break. The worst was actually here on the numbers, and I think it's because the numbers, the stencils are just protruding slightly. We're doing this a little opposite. We're trying to protect the black underneath. That's a different story. Anyway, so we were getting these runs, and we were running out of paint faster. Now, we had our gun set at 2.5 turns, which is what's recommended. But I think that was actually too much. In fact, I know it was too much, because it should be that we're using about the same amount of paint. The wet coat should be the equivalent. So if you add up these three coats, the first three fog coats, the amount of paint you use in these first three should be equivalent to the amount of paint you use in the last wet coat. So if you used, 100 grams of paint here, you should be using 100 grams of paint here. And that was not happening. We were going through it much faster. And so we're like, oh, we got to mix up more paint. And as my partner's mixing up additional paint, then I started seeing these runs develop. It took several minutes, 10 or 15 minutes before the run started. So, your heart drops like, oh no. And then you start seeing it on all of them. They all started developing a run somewhere. The exception, there was one side of one of these, I don't know which side it is, that actually is totally fine. And I was actually just able to buff it later, and it was fine. But all the rest of them, we're going to be respraying all of them. So all of these -1. So that was kind of a letdown. Fortunately, they're just tail feathers. They're not the wings or anything as far as like surface area material. Certainly we have the extra expense of the paint, and that paint is not cheap. If you looked at the price of it, is pricey. It's used for certified airplanes, so it's not cheap paint by any means. But that's where we're at. So you can see one of the worst ones here. So I don't know. I was be frank, I was fairly frustrated. Kind of frustrated with myself, frustrated with the paint system, just frustrated with the process. We're kind of debating on a couple different changes here. Of course, now we're reshooting. So now what we're going to do differently is we're going to do each side in two different settings. So we're going to paint all these sides at once. We're actually going to put some other miscellaneous pieces here that we have ready to paint, metal pieces. And then we'll flip them in a couple days, and we'll paint the other side. Our plan is not to really pay attention to shooting the edges. The edges actually went really good. This one actually just bumped up against something. But other than that, the edges are really good. Great coverage, no runs on the edges, surprisingly. So yeah, they looked great. So that's our plan. We're gonna shoot those. The other thing we're thinking about is going forward when we paint, maybe not on that third coat, turning it, the wet coat, turning it all the way up to 2.5 times. Maybe breaking that out. So possibly breaking that out into 2 coats. In fact, it almost implies that here in the directions. Wet coat left to right, cross coat if needed. So our thought here is that instead of this being 2.5 times, because I think this is 1 1/8 turn, 1 1/4 turn, and then 1 3/8 of a turn, I think is how it goes. And then all of a sudden it jumps up to 2.5 times. So instead of this being 2.5 times, this might be 1 3/4 or maybe 2, probably like 1 3/4 to be honest. And then do another coat after that. Then you'll have an additional coat of paint, but I think it'll allow more time for the paint to really adhere, so that the next coat going on top has something more to grab onto, because it was just too much paint, too much paint going on. Because the shine was coming. In fact, we noticed that even after our third cross coat, the shine was starting to come by the third cross coat. Now, another thing that was affecting us that day, it was the hottest day we've ever painted, and it was 85% humidity. So I want to say it was 75 degrees outside or something like that, 75 or 80 degrees outside. We got the booth cooled down to probably 75 degrees if it was 80 outside. And then, yeah, such a high humidity. So that probably affected us. What else here? Oh, so now we're sanding. One thing I've noticed here in the instructions, they talk about using open coat sandpaper. Up to this point, that hasn't really mattered. We've actually used other sandpaper. So for the Ekofill, I don't think it really matters. It doesn't really, this material Ekofill doesn't really ball up. For the Eco Prime, it definitely doesn't. That is an awesome product. That stuff sands so easily. It's almost like sanding drywall. It sands really well and very smooth. But when it comes to this, I've totally noticed a difference. The Eco Prime does not want to be sanded, which probably is good, honestly. It's probably a good thing. Probably be resistant to all kinds of things happening to it. It doesn't want to be sanded. And so, one, it balls up under the sandpaper. Two, it also wears out the sandpaper really fast. That really surprised me. So when the sandpaper seems like it looks good, even if it looks okay, it really isn't. So this piece I've been sanding quite a bit. It's done, I know that it is, but I'll just kind of give you an example here. So on this, I haven't sanded this yet. So if we just take this piece here, this is I'll say a worn out piece of sandpaper. If we're just sanding, first of all, you can't really feel it. There's not a lot of resistance. You don't really see anything happening. There's like nothing's happening. I mean, very little, right? You don't really see any material starting to build up. We go to the open coat, and here when I sand, you can already see the material that's coming off. Now, of course, this is 320. It's not pulling off a lot of material, right? And the whole purpose here is just to give a surface for the new paint to adhere to on top. We're just roughing this up. So it's already been smooth. We've already sanded out the runs and whatnot. But yeah, big difference there. And of course, it helps to have some air. The air hose that fell off here helps to be constantly blowing off the sandpaper. But I found pretty quickly that you need to be changing out your sandpaper. When you're sanding the Ekopoly Premium, your sandpaper is just not going to last. It's going to be ineffective fairly fast. So be ready to do that. I mean, the sandpaper is cheap, but definitely get the open coat. It does make a difference here. Other sandpaper, which I found that most hardware stores don't have it, or I could never find it. We ended up having to get it from Stewart Systems. I'm sure you could find it online somewhere else, but it's not like it's expensive from them. I was just curious that even paint stores around here didn't have it. So, yeah. And what's the other thing? Oh, this is something that kind of bugged me a little bit with the runs. So up to this point, we really haven't had an issue with runs. But when we did get the runs, one thing that was kind of annoying about it was that wherever there was a run or sagging of the paint, it was darker. So the first thing we tried was just kind of lightly sanding over it and seeing if we could buff it. And while it was fairly easy to knock it down to where it was smooth without hitting, seeing the primer, this is going past that. I've already sanded this with 320. But even if you could get it smooth, you could not get rid of the dark coloration. So wherever it built up too much, for whatever reason, that's just how the paint works. It just leaves, I don't want to say a stain, but the paint is clearly darker in those areas, and that's not coming out with buffing. So yeah, you can see where this was being suspended. This was the top, and that was hanging down, and this is where the run happened at the very top. So, and then it'd come down here again. It would usually happen where there's something that would this crossbar just protrudes just a little bit, right? I mean, looking down at it, you can't really see it, but it's just pushing out on the fabric just a hair. And that's just enough for that surface tension to just kind of build up and let loose there, if I'm explaining that right. And that's where that sag would start. So it would almost always happen there. This was an anomaly where it happened here at the top, kind of same with the other one. But yeah, that's kind of our experience. A little frustrated with it, but we're just learning. So in the process, though, we also went and got the supplies for cutting and buffing, and I was very pleased and surprised at how effective that is. So we're definitely going to be doing that to the other parts we've already finished that we're already satisfied with. That there's nothing, they don't need to be resprayed, but they've got just a little bit of orange peel, or just if you get up real close, you can see just slight imperfections, and the cutting and buffing should totally take care of that. At least that's what we're hoping. So far, just the tests on that have been very positive. So we'll probably I'll do a video on that too, because I've noticed there's not a lot of information online about cutting and buffing. There is a video that's several years old of an older gentleman, I'm assuming an A&P, doing a blue and white airplane. And then he's doing cutting and buffing on the fuselage, and he does a great job and just makes it really pop, and his explanation is excellent. So anyway, hope that helps somebody who's along this process. The system does bode well for newbies, but there's still things that take some learning to figure out. And let me just do a quick explanation over here, if you're curious why the numbers are the way they look right now. We actually are painting over the prior fabric job. So my partner had already recovered just the tail feathers a couple years ago, and his covering job was great. And I used some kind of butyrate process. I don't remember the exact name of it. And it was great. It looked awesome. But it was not the same yellow. So we couldn't just leave and just have tail feathers that had a different shade of yellow. So we're like, oh, okay. Well, we see the one benefit of the Stewart system was we could paint over existing covering jobs. It was certified to do that. And true enough, it is. It works fine. But so all we did was we primed over the we scuffed up the original paint, primed over it. We didn't need to use Ekopoly because it already had a UV blockage in the original system. So primed over it, and then sprayed the yellow. But in the process, though, we wanted to keep the original numbers as far as like where they were, not having to repaint the numbers. So my partner had made these stencils out of what kind of contact paper, the sticky contact paper he found that adheres really well, really, really well. So anyway, he was able to trace them out just perfectly and get those on there. So that's what you're seeing here. So this is covering the original black paint job that he did a couple years ago, and hopefully that'll work out good. If we get just some irregularities around the edges, his wife's an artist, so we're hoping that she has a fine finger and can fix any errors that may exist. And honestly, if there's just the smallest thing here, we could care less. So yeah, that's why that is the way it is. And this one's new because we actually just wanted to see what happened after we painted it the first time here about a week and a half ago or so. We wanted to see how it looked underneath and if there was any issue pulling this off, and there wasn't. It pulled off fine. So that's that. That explains why that is. And sorry for all my rambling here. Hopefully this is helpful for someone. So good luck to you.